Radical Candor by Kim Scott. Picture this. You've had a boss who was genuinely wonderful, warm, and encouraging, who made you feel valued every single day. But here's the thing. They also let you walk straight off a cliff. Or maybe you've experienced the flip side. A brilliant, demanding boss who pushed you to heights you never imagined, but left you feeling about 2 inches tall in the process, publicly humiliated and quietly furious. Sound familiar? And if you've ever stepped into a leadership role, even something as simple as leading a group project or coaching a little league team, you've probably felt that stomach-churning tension, the impossible choice that keeps you up at night. Should I be the likable, conflict-avoiding leader everyone wants to grab drinks with, or the hard-driving, results-obsessed taskmaster everyone secretly fantasizes about quitting on? It's like walking a tightrope blindfolded. Most people tumble off, landing either in the too nice to be effective camp or the effective but insufferable zone. For the longest time, these seemed like the only options on the menu. But here's where things get interesting. What if I told you there's a third path? A way to be genuinely kind and wildly effective at the same time. A way to build teams where people actually love showing up to work, deeply respect their leader, and consistently knock it out of the park. This is exactly what we're diving into today with Radical Candor by Kim Scott. Now, before your eyes glaze over thinking this is just another dusty business manual, hear me out. Since this book hit shelves, its framework has quietly revolutionized how teams operate at places like Google, Apple, and Twitter. It's become the not-so-secret weapon of the world's best managers. Kim Scott didn't dream this stuff up in an ivory tower. She lived it, face-planted spectacularly along the way, and learned from some of the most legendary leaders of our generation. Today, we're going to unpack a deceptively simple framework that's transformed well-meaning but struggling managers into the kind of leaders people would follow through fire. By the time we're done, you'll understand how to give feedback that actually helps people grow instead of making them defensive, how to build teams that are both rock-solid and innovative, and most importantly, how to lead without checking your humanity at the door. This is about becoming what Scott calls a kick-ass boss without losing your soul in the process. The story of Radical Candor begins with Kim Scott's most spectacular professional failure, and it has a name, Bob. When Kim launched her own software company, she had a vision. She was determined to create the anti-corporate workplace, somewhere people would actually want to be. A place where support, happiness, and sanity weren't just buzzwords on motivational posters. And Bob seemed like living proof that her dream could work. Everyone adored him. He was funny, genuinely kind, the guy who'd drop everything to help a teammate. His resume was absolutely spotless, except for one tiny, devastating problem. His work was spectacularly, consistently terrible. Not just mediocre or rough around the edges, we're talking fundamentally awful. Shortly after Bob joined, Kim asked him to prepare an important document. When he handed it over, she was genuinely shocked. The text was a jumbled mess, barely coherent. And the worst part? She could see in his eyes, in the awkward way he passed it across the desk, that Bob knew exactly how bad it was. This was her moment. Kim was the founder. Her struggling startup couldn't afford deadweight. She knew she needed to address this head-on, right now. But as she sat there looking at Bob's anxious face, she completely froze. She imagined him tearing up. She pictured the rest of her team, who all loved Bob, watching her crush this sweet guy's spirit. Would they think she was some kind of corporate monster? So she chickened out. Instead, she heard herself saying words that made her stomach turn. "This is a great start, Bob. Let's polish it up together." Bob's face lit up with relief as he left her office. And in that single moment of cowardice disguised as kindness, Kim set a disaster in motion. She thought she was being compassionate. In reality, she was being catastrophically, destructively unclear. For 10 agonizing months, she repeated this same mistake on loop. She'd hint at problems, soften every criticism, or just quietly fix Bob's work herself, all while her frustration grew like a pressure cooker. She started avoiding him in the hallways. Her disappointment slowly curdled into resentment. She no longer just thought his work was subpar. She was beginning to think he was the problem. The rest of her team felt the shift too. They watched Kim accept terrible work and started questioning whether she could even tell the difference between excellence and mediocrity. Her top performers began staying late to clean up Bob's messes. Their own work started slipping. The team's energy and cohesion were crumbling, and she was the one holding the sledgehammer. Finally, with her team on the verge of implosion, she couldn't delay any longer. She invited Bob for coffee, and after several painful false starts, she fired him. They sat in crushing silence. Then Bob looked directly into her eyes and asked a question that would haunt her for years. "Why didn't you tell me?" Then came the follow-up that cut even deeper. "Why didn't anyone tell me? I thought you all cared about me." It was the absolute lowest point of her career. She'd been so terrified of hurting Bob's feelings for a few uncomfortable minutes that she'd allowed him to fail completely, publicly and permanently. Her attempts to be nice had produced the cruelest possible outcome. She hadn't just failed Bob, she'd failed her entire company. And not long after, that company closed its doors for good. This painful, expensive lesson became the forge where the idea of radical candor was hammered into shape. It was a masterclass paid for with failure, and it launched Kim on a mission to discover a better way to lead. That quest eventually brought her to Google, where she'd encounter a leader who would show her what that better way actually looked like. Sheryl Sandberg. Shortly after joining, Kim delivered a major presentation to Google's founders and CEO. The business she was running, AdSense, was absolutely crushing it. The numbers were phenomenal, and the meeting was a massive win. Walking out, riding high on adrenaline, Kim felt Sheryl's hand on her arm. "Can you walk back to my office?" Immediately, Kim's stomach dropped. She knew something was coming. Sheryl opened with praise, but this wasn't generic cheerleading. It was specific and genuine. She told Kim how her ability to argue multiple perspectives had built serious credibility. She called out exact moments where Kim had handled tough questions brilliantly. This wasn't empty flattery, it was real and detailed. But Kim knew there was more. "But," she prompted, bracing for impact. "You said, a lot," Sheryl said gently. "Were you aware of it?" Kim brushed it off immediately. "Yeah, I know. It's just a verbal tic." Seriously, who cared about a few ums when the business was skyrocketing? Sheryl offered to hire a speech coach. Google would cover it entirely. Again, Kim waved her hand dismissively. No, I'm good." Sheryl laughed, but then she stopped. She looked Kim square in the eye. "When you do that thing with your hand," she said calmly, "I feel like you're ignoring what I'm telling you. I can see I'm going to have to be more direct here. You are one of the smartest people I know, but saying, so much makes you sound stupid." The words landed like a punch. It stung, no question. But here's the thing. Because Sheryl had opened by showing she genuinely cared, because she'd offered specific praise and actual help, the sting wasn't an insult. It was a wake-up call, a gift wrapped in uncomfortable honesty. Kim instantly understood that Sheryl wasn't trying to wound her, she was trying to help her level up. She immediately took the speech coach, and within a few sessions, the problem vanished. This conversation, maybe 3 minutes total, was an absolute revelation. Sheryl had managed to do what Kim had catastrophically failed to do with Bob. She'd delivered crystal clear, direct, challenging feedback, but she'd done it from a foundation of genuine care. She hadn't worried about being liked, she'd worried about helping Kim succeed. This is the beating heart of radical candor. It's brilliantly simple, built on 2 fundamental axes. Picture a graph in your mind. The vertical axis represents care personally. The horizontal axis represents challenge directly. When you do both simultaneously, when you genuinely care about someone and you directly challenge them, you're operating in the zone of radical candor. This is exactly what Sheryl did. She demonstrated that she cared deeply about Kim as a person and about her career trajectory, and then she delivered unvarnished, direct truth. It was simultaneously kind and clear. But what happens when you mess up the balance? You tumble into one of three other significantly less effective zones. Let's start with the trap Kim fell into with Bob. This is when you care deeply about someone, but you completely fail to challenge them directly. You're so worried about hurting feelings that you withhold the truth they desperately need to hear. Scott calls this ruinous empathy, and it's the source of most management disasters. It feels warm and fuzzy in the moment, but it's ultimately destructive. You offer dishonest praise, you swallow criticism, and you watch people continue failing. Scott shares a brutal but perfect Russian saying, "It's like someone who loves his dog so much that when he has to amputate its tail, he cuts it off 1 inch at a time to spare the dog's pain." The desire to be nice just prolongs the agony. Now, flip to the opposite extreme. This is when you challenge directly, but forget to show you care personally at all. This is obnoxious aggression. This is your classic jerk boss, the person whose feedback feels like getting slapped. They might get short-term results, but they leave a trail of wounded, resentful people behind them. Think of the boss who screams, humiliates people in meetings, or delivers backhanded compliments, like poisoned candy. Here's the twist. Scott argues this is actually the second-best zone to operate in. Why? Because at least it's clear. People know exactly where they stand. It's unpleasant and demoralizing, but it's honest. It's better than being left confused and failing in the dark because of ruinous empathy. Finally, there's the absolute worst zone of all. This is when you neither care personally nor challenge directly. This is manipulative insincerity. This is workplace politics at its most toxic. Backstabbing behavior, fake praise, and criticism whispered behind closed doors. People operating here care more about being liked or gaining political advantage than about telling the truth. It's the most poisonous behavior possible, and it destroys teams from the inside out. Steve Jobs once confronted his top designer, Jony Ive, about why he wasn't being more direct with his team. Jony replied, "Because I care about the team." Steve shot back immediately, "No, Jony, you're just vain. You just want people to like you." That's manipulative insincerity in a nutshell. To understand radical candor in its purest, most beautiful form, Scott tells a wonderful story. Shortly after adopting a golden retriever puppy named Belvy, she was walking her through the city. The puppy was absolutely out of control, yanking and pulling at her leash as they waited at a busy intersection. Belvy tried to lunge directly into traffic. "Sit, sweetie, sit," Kim pleaded uselessly, getting absolutely nowhere. Suddenly, a stranger standing beside her glanced over. He didn't judge or criticize her. He opened with care. "I can see you really love your dog," he said warmly. Then came the direct challenge. "But that dog is going to die if you don't teach her to sit." Before Kim could react, he bent down, pointed firmly at the sidewalk, and said in a loud, unmistakably clear voice, "Sit." The puppy sat immediately, like she'd been doing it her whole life. The man smiled at Kim's shock. "It's not mean," he said simply. "It's clear." The light changed, and he walked away, leaving her with possibly the most profound management lesson of her entire career. It's not mean, it's clear. That's the mantra of radical candor. It's about having the courage to say what needs to be said because you care about someone enough to want them to actually succeed, not just to feel temporarily comfortable. So how do you actually put this into practice in real life? It starts with something that feels totally backwards. Before you start handing out feedback left and right, you have to prove you can take it yourself. The first step in building a culture of radical candor is asking for criticism, not giving it. This is genuinely hard. When you're the boss, or the team leader, or the person with authority, people are absolutely terrified of criticizing you. You have to actively create safety and practically drag it out of them. Scott recommends a simple go-to question. Is there anything I could do or stop doing that would make it easier to work with me? And when you ask, you absolutely cannot let them off the hook easily. Most people will immediately say, "Oh no, everything's great." Don't accept that. You have to lean into the discomfort. Sit in silence. Count to 6 slowly in your head. Ask, again, differently. Show them through your body language and patience that you genuinely want the hard truth. And when someone finally offers you that precious gift of honest criticism, your reaction is absolutely everything. You cannot get defensive. You cannot punish them, even subtly. You have to listen with the intent to genuinely understand, not to immediately respond or explain. And then, critically, you must reward their candor. If you agree with the feedback, make a visible change they can see. If you disagree, you still have to explain why, respectfully and thoughtfully. Demonstrating that you can receive criticism gracefully is the only way you'll ever earn the right to give it. Scott shares a great personal story about this struggle. A colleague named Russ told her she had a bad habit of constantly interrupting him. She knew he was right, but she also knew it was a deeply ingrained habit that would be hard to break. Instead of just promising to try harder, she did something visible and vulnerable. She put a thick rubber band on her wrist and told Russ directly, "Every time I interrupt you, snap this band." Then she told her entire team to do the same thing. Soon, people were snapping that band regularly. The snapping helped her interrupt less over time, but more importantly, it sent a powerful signal to her entire team. She heard the criticism, she was taking it dead seriously, and she wanted more honest feedback. Once you've established that two-way street for honest feedback, you can start building a team that truly embodies these principles. And one of the most brilliant, paradigm-shifting insights in Radical Candor is how Scott reimagines ambition and team roles. Scott learned this transformative lesson at Apple. For most of her career, she'd believed that every great employee should be on a steep upward trajectory, constantly gunning for that next promotion. But a leader at Apple completely changed her perspective. This leader explained that every truly great team needs two distinct types of high performers: rock stars and superstars. Superstars are people on a steep growth trajectory. They're change agents, absolutely brimming with ambition and energy, and they need constant new challenges and opportunities. They're the engine of your team's growth and innovation. If they're doing the exact same job a year from now, they'll get bored, frustrated, and they'll leave. But rock stars are equally important and often undervalued. Rock stars are on a more gradual growth trajectory. They're your forces for stability. Think of them not as Bruce Springsteen on stage, but as the Rock of Gibraltar, solid and unshakable. They've found their groove, they genuinely love their craft, and they're world-class at what they do. They don't want your job or their boss's job. Pushing them toward a promotion they don't want is the absolute fastest way to either lose them or make them miserable. Your job as a leader isn't to push everyone relentlessly upward. It's to deeply understand what each person actually wants, and to create opportunities that align with their own personal definition of success and fulfillment. This means you need to have what Scott calls career conversations. These aren't your typical check-the-box annual performance reviews. These are deep, genuinely human conversations, designed to understand what truly motivates and drives each person on your team. Russ Laraway, Scott's co-founder and a brilliant manager in his own right, developed a beautiful 3-step process for this. The first conversation is about their life story. You literally start by saying, "Starting with kindergarten, tell me about your life." You listen carefully for the pivots, the transitions, the moments that shaped them. You're trying to understand what fundamentally drives them, what values matter most. You're seeing them as a complete human being, not just as an employee filling a role. The second conversation explores their dreams. You ask them to describe 3 to 5 dreams for their life, both personal and professional. What would the absolute pinnacle of their career look like? Maybe one dream is becoming CEO. Maybe another is opening an organic farm or traveling the world. The goal is to get past the polished professional answers people think you want to hear and understand what they truly want out of their one precious life. The third conversation creates an 18-month plan. Now you connect the dots between where they are and where they want to go. How can their current role help them develop the specific skills they need to move toward their dreams? Scott shares the story of one woman whose dream was to start a spirulina farm. Together, they realized that gaining solid management experience at Google was actually the most valuable skill she could develop right now. Suddenly, her current job wasn't just a paycheck, it was a strategic stepping stone toward her ultimate dream. By having these conversations, you demonstrate that you care personally in the most profound way imaginable. You're helping people build the life they actually want, not just the career your company needs from them. And here's the beautiful paradox. This is the very best way to keep people motivated, engaged, productive, and genuinely loyal. With this deep understanding of your team's individual motivations and trajectories, you can now focus on actually driving results. But just like with feedback, simply telling people what to do is remarkably ineffective. The best leaders don't dictate from on high, they collaborate. Scott introduces a beautifully simple, cyclical framework for this, called the Get Stuff Done Wheel, or GSD for short. It's a 7-step process: listen, clarify, debate, decide, persuade, execute, learn. Then the cycle starts again. Everything begins with listening. Your primary job as a leader is creating a culture where ideas can actually be heard, especially from the quieter voices in the room. This doesn't mean you personally have to be a silent, contemplative listener like Apple's CEO Tim Cook, who uses strategic silence to draw people out. You could also be what Scott calls a loud listener like Steve Jobs, who would throw a strong, provocative idea on the table specifically to force a reaction and actively insist people push back hard. The specific style matters far less than the outcome, making sure all ideas get a fair hearing. Next, you clarify. New ideas are fragile little things. They can be easily crushed before they're fully understood or developed. Your job isn't to immediately judge whether an idea is good or bad, but to help your team sharpen it, refine it, make it clearer and more robust. You're acting as an editor and coach, not just the author or critic. Once an idea is genuinely clear, it's time to debate. Steve Jobs used the wonderful analogy of a rock tumbler. When you put rough, ordinary rocks into a tumbler with some grit and just let them bang against each other for a while, they emerge smooth and beautifully polished. Healthy debate does exactly the same thing for ideas and for teams. It's noisy, there's friction and sparks, but it's absolutely essential for getting to the best possible answer. Your job isn't to shut down debate to avoid uncomfortable conflict. It's to turn on the rock tumbler and make sure the process remains safe, respectful, and genuinely productive. After a healthy debate where all perspectives have been heard, it's time to decide. But here's the key insight. The boss isn't always the decider, and shouldn't be. The very best decisions are made by pushing decision-making authority toward the facts and the people closest to those facts. This means empowering the people who actually have the most relevant information to make the call whenever it's possible and appropriate. As the leader, your role is often to create a clear, fair decision-making process, not to personally make every single decision. Once a decision has been made, you must persuade. Not everyone was in the debate or the decision meeting. You can't just announce a decision and expect everyone to immediately fall in line enthusiastically. You have to bring them along on the journey. This involves appealing not just to cold logic, but also to emotion and to your own credibility. You need to clearly communicate the why behind the decision and genuinely connect with how people might feel about it. Then comes execute. This is where your team actually gets stuff done and delivers results. Your job here is primarily to clear roadblocks and fiercely protect your team's time and focus so they can do their best work. As Sheryl Sandberg modeled for her teams at Google, you act as what the military calls a, quote, sapper, someone who diffuses political bombs and clears obstacles so your team can move forward without constantly getting bogged down. And finally, you learn. After execution, you must look at the results with brutally honest eyes. What actually worked? What fell flat? What surprised us? This learning phase feeds directly back into the listening stage, and the wheel begins turning again. This constant cycle of collaborative execution is what allows teams to achieve extraordinary things that no individual could ever accomplish alone. Throughout this entire process of giving guidance, building your team, and driving results, those two core principles of radical candor serve as your compass. In absolutely every interaction, you should be asking yourself two simple questions. Am I genuinely showing that I care personally about this human being? And am I challenging them directly with honesty and clarity? When you have to fire someone, are you doing it with real compassion and crystal clarity, helping them understand it's about a mismatch of fit, not about them being fundamentally flawed as a person? When you promote someone, are you making that decision fairly based on actual merit and performance, not on personal favoritism or politics? When you're running a meeting, are you actively creating a space where people feel genuinely safe to listen deeply, debate vigorously, and disagree respectfully? It all comes back to that elegantly simple 2x2 grid. It's a practical tool for navigating the messy, complicated, deeply human world of working with other people. It's not about achieving perfection, which is impossible. It's about being conscious and intentional, being courageously honest, and above all, remaining genuinely, vulnerably human. What makes radical candor so genuinely powerful, and why has it resonated so deeply with hundreds of thousands of people across industries and cultures? I believe it's because it gives language and structure to a fundamental human dilemma we all wrestle with constantly, not just at work but throughout our entire lives. It solves the ancient paradox of being simultaneously kind and effective. For far too long we've been taught a completely false choice, that to be strong and get results you must be hard and cold, and that to be kind and caring you must be soft and avoid difficult conversations. Kim Scott brilliantly dismantles this toxic myth. She demonstrates with story after story that the single kindest thing you can do for another human being is to tell them the honest truth they need to hear. And the most effective way to lead and get extraordinary results is from a foundation of genuine human connection and care. These two things aren't opposing forces. They're two sides of the exact same coin. The most profound lesson in this entire book, at least for me personally, is the radical shift in perspective it demands. Feedback stops being an attack that needs to be defended against. It becomes a gift to be genuinely received with gratitude. Criticism isn't meant to tear someone down or make them feel small. It's meant to help them build themselves up and reach their full potential. When you truly internalize that belief, and when you can help the people around you believe it too, absolutely everything changes. That paralyzing fear that freezes so many of our important interactions, the fear of offending someone, the fear of being disliked, the fear of conflict and discomfort, it begins to melt away and loses its power over you. And the brilliant distinction between rock stars and superstars is an absolute game changer for how we think about teams and careers. In a world completely obsessed with relentless, always upward-only ambition and constant climbing, this framework gives us genuine permission to value stability, deep mastery, and contentment. It recognizes that a healthy, high-performing team, much like a healthy, natural ecosystem, needs both the fast-growing young trees reaching aggressively for the sunlight and the ancient, deep-rooted ones that hold the entire forest together through storms. It's a more humane, more sustainable, and ultimately far more effective way to think about talent and team building. So how can you start putting these powerful ideas into practice right now, today, in your actual life? Here are a few concrete, simple actions you can take immediately. First, the very next time you need to give someone feedback, whether it's a work colleague, a family member, a friend, or anyone else in your life, pause for just a moment before you speak. Before a single word leaves your mouth, ask yourself this one question: how can I first show this person that I genuinely care about them personally? It could be as simple as genuinely acknowledging their hard work and effort, asking sincerely about their day or what's on their mind, or just making absolutely sure your tone of voice is coming from a place of wanting to help, not from judgment or frustration. That one simple act of conscious intention can completely transform the entire dynamic of the conversation. Second, find someone you genuinely trust, whether that's a mentor, a close colleague, a friend, or even your own boss, and ask them Scott's magic question: is there anything I could do or stop doing that would make it easier to work with me? And then commit to simply listening without defense. Don't explain yourself, don't justify your behavior, don't immediately problem solve. Just listen with open ears and an open heart. It will feel uncomfortable and vulnerable, I promise you that, but it's one of the single most powerful steps you can take toward building more honest, trusting, effective relationships. And finally, take a good look at the people you work with closely, whether on a formal team or in any collaborative setting. Try to identify who the rock stars and superstars are, who are the reliable, steady, incredibly skilled forces for stability that you can absolutely count on, and who are the ambitious agents of change and growth, always restlessly pushing for what's next. Start honestly thinking about whether you're giving each of them what they truly need to thrive and feel fulfilled, not just what you think they should want, based on conventional wisdom about career advancement. That was a summary of Radical Candor by Kim Scott. We've covered the core framework, the biggest stories, and the key insights today. But I need to be completely honest with you about something important. A summary like this can give you the map and show you the territory, but it absolutely cannot take you on the full journey. The real transformative power of this book lives in the nuance, the deeply personal and vulnerable stories, and the detailed, practical, step-by-step advice that Kim Scott provides throughout. This summary is your starting point, a way to see if this path resonates with you and is worth exploring further. If anything we've discussed today has sparked something in you, if it's made you think differently about how you interact with the people in your life, I genuinely and wholeheartedly encourage you to pick up a copy of the full book. Reading it cover to cover isn't just about learning a new management technique or adding another skill to your resume. It's a genuine invitation to become a better, more effective, and more compassionate human being in every single relationship you have, at work and beyond. You'll find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this exploration valuable and worth your time, please take just a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us know we're on the right track and creating content that actually matters to you, and it ensures you won't miss our next deep dive into another potentially life-changing book. Let's keep growing, learning, and becoming better versions of ourselves together.